No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. This is Outspoken episode number 360 and breaking today. The shocking true cost of Islamist Britain has been exposed as the coup against Slippery Starmer is underway to make Shabana Mahmood the first Muslim Prime Minister of the Disunited Kingdom.
Islam, my own religion, like a lot of practicing Muslims, my faith is the most important thing in my life. It is the absolute driver of everything that I do. I feel a very strong calling of my own conscience, and my conscience calls me to God.
But the MSM is not telling you the truth about the real reason the left of Labour wants Two Tier Keir out as soon as possible in order to neutralise the threat from the Greens and Corbyn's Islamist mob. But we shouldn't be surprised, given they are not reporting the Islamist warnings to our way of life at all. Like the fact young Muslim Sara Sharif was tortured to death by her Pakistani father after a catalogue of blunders by authorities who missed bruises under her hijab because they were afraid of being called racist.
A review, which has been released in just the last few moments, finds that from social services to the NHS and educational authorities, the system failed Sara. It said she should never have been placed in the care of her father and stepmother, describing the killers as a lethal combination.
Marilyn, what are those safeguarding officials afraid of when they fail to take action?
Oh, I'll tell you what it'll be. You know as well as I do, Miriam. It's the R word.
They're afraid that they'll be called racist.
Racism. That's what it'll be. It'll be racism.
And as we come to air today, there is a new lobbying effort to see the ISIS bride Shamima Begum return to the UK despite overwhelming public revulsion to the idea.
What Islamic State were doing when you left for Syria, because they had beheaded people, there were executions.
Yeah, I knew about those things and I was okay with it.
We are not having her back, okay? End of story. Meanwhile, a Talk TV star has broken ranks amid all of this silence that has surrounded the sacking of Mike Graham, with the popular presenter Russell Quirk slamming station bosses over their handling of the controversy and suggesting it could result in the eventual closure of Talk.
Because I don't believe that what Mike has done is incorrect in any way, particularly when you are the presenter, as Mike was, of the most successful show on that channel, The Breakfast Show from 6 till 10. I do think there's an irony to someone having a post appear on their social media channels that talks about an opinion which also relates to something that is concerning millions of people in this country in terms of illegal immigration, for instance, as part of that debate. But that in that person's own time, they say something that later on then effectively gets them the boot from their job. The commercial implications of what's happened here, I'm afraid, I think now put a big question mark, not over just the commercial viability of Talk itself, but also its very future.
But News UK insiders are hitting back on what they claim is the real reason why Mike Graham was fired. So we'll get into all of it with our superstar panel shortly. Nick Buckley MBE, author of the brilliant book Anglophobia, A Price Worth Paying to Be English, which is available now from Amazon. And Pink Ladies campaigner Sarah White, who recently defected from Reform UK to Advance UK. Also coming up on the show today, Donald Trump slams the British Fashion Corporation as a leftist propaganda machine as its crooked and corrupt news division proves the point with lies being spread about Restore Britain leader Rupert Lowe, who isn't taking it lying down, and the downfall of a comedy legend, an icon in John Cleese, as his deranged and truly despicable hard-left politics have gone too far. Then, in the uncancelled after show on Substack, growing fallout between the Kardashians and the Sussexes over Meghan Markle and Prince Harry's ludicrous reaction to photos being released from Kris Jenner's 70th birthday party. Well, it's all turned toxic now, so we're going to reveal the truth about the briefing and the counter briefing with the return of Lady Colin Campbell. That is in the Outspoken after show over on Substack after this main show, www.outspoken.live if you want to watch. We'll also reveal a brand new Greatest Britain and Union Jackass before we go today, so make sure you stay with us. Here are your nominees for the worst Britain in the world today. If you're watching live, you can vote right now in the YouTube chat section. Tony Blair, nominated by MattCass48, who says he hasn't mentioned that 3 million times, and every time anything at all happens, the death of the UK started with this man. Anything he wants is disastrous for us, so just say no to Blair. Anna Sawa, nominated by Darren Donaldson, the Scottish Labour leader, for calling you racist again and spewing facts that we know in his angry style. Good luck, Scotland. We have our racist MPs down here, but yours are seemingly ones on steroids. And Ed Davey, the Liberal Democrat leader, nominated by Jane Kendrick, for calling for the sacking of Robbie Gibb, even though it doesn't change the facts about BBC bias. So there are your three nominees today. Get voting. There's some breaking news about the British Bashing Corporation and Donald Trump, which I'm going to bring you later in the show too. So stick around. Let's go. The mainstream media isn't telling you the truth about the coup against Slippery Starmer, Britain's failed Prime Minister, which has burst into the open this week. Certainly it's disastrous for our worst and most unpopular leader in history, whose phase 3 is oblivion. But the decision to protect the coup leader, Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood, and instead throw the Health Secretary Wes Streeting, who doesn't have a hope in hell of convincing the hard left and Labour to make him leader, well, it's purposeful. And as this new graphic shows, Mahmood is exactly where she wants to be. Very much in contention, but allowing Streeting and Andy Burnham to take the heat for bringing down a democratically elected Prime Minister. Mark my words, though, this coup against Starmer has Islamist roots, as Labour is being obliterated on the hard left by the openly Islamist Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana mob, and tit whisperers at Polanski's soaring Green Party. Mahmood, in the view of Labour leftists, is the woman who can change all of that.
Islam, my own religion, like a lot of practicing Muslims, my faith is the most important thing in my life. It is the absolute driver of everything that I do. I feel a very strong calling of my own conscience, and my conscience calls me to God.
The Spectator reported that others claim Shabana Mahmood is also a favourite for the top job. Angela Rayner and Miliband's name have also cropped up. And Politico added that the Telegraph's Ben Riley-Smith picked up last night on some heat heading the Home Secretary's way too, amid claims from Keir's supporters that she is also plotting to replace him. A Mahmood ally told the paper this was nonsense coming from one big number 10 operation to shore up Starmer's position, but some noticed that the focus on Streeting versus Starmer may assist Mahmood, who is increasingly talked about alongside the Health Secretary as a potential future leader. Enter stage right, Labour peer and Blue Labour lad Maurice Glassman, a big fan of the Home Secretary, on Newsnight where he slagged off Streeting as a Blairite apparatchik out of the student union and described Mahmood as the only one of really genuine quality of the whole lot. Look at this moment.
Is this Home Secretary the right woman to address some of those issues?
For me, absolutely. I mean, she's the only one of really genuine quality of the whole lot, but she's got a job to do. She's got to stop the boat, she's got to sort out the prisons. So at the moment, I'm not in favour of any challenge to the Prime Minister and full support for Shabana Mahmood in the work she's doing.
Okay.
Wes Streeting is a very new Labour. I absolutely dispute, Nick, that he's the closest person to Keir Starmer. He's a Blairite apparatchik out the student union, so all they know is leadership battles and motions and things like this. It's of no relevance whatsoever.
But of course, the Mahmood angle completely ignored in a truly dire lineup of newspaper front pages for Starmer today. It looks like editors have finally accepted this bloke is a lame duck. So there on the front of the Times, the PM told to fire top aide as civil war hits Labour. The Daily Mail says at last a ray of hope. The ousted PM will trigger an election. There's the Telegraph. Streeting goes to war with number 10. The Metro very much backs Wes Streeting as a faithful and damning on the front of the Express. Desperate PM in office, but not in power. However, I was much more interested in the national front page out of Scotland. Sarwar's silence. The Scottish Labour leader fails to back PM as coup rumours fly. Why would Sarwar fail to back Starmer, given he has made it clear he does not want white men in power and would welcome a Muslim in number 10? Now, why is that a threat, some of you may ask? Well, because as we've seen with the election of Mamdani in New York and the Sharia courts operating up and down the UK, there is an increasing attempt to replace civil law with Sharia law. It's a takeover. And the MSM just shrugged off woke ITV's Good Morning Britain presenter Adil Ray advocating for Sharia in the past week. They've also ignored this chilling declaration of a takeover just this week by Corbyn's sectarian MP Iqbal Muhammad.
These events, these activities, this unity must grow and continue and take over not just parts of Birmingham, but the whole of Birmingham, the whole of the West Midlands, the whole of the UK. Grassroots democracy in action. And we, our communities, have shown the establishment and the rest of the country that we will not be taken for granted, and we will win. The establishment know that if you let one person stand up to them and speak the truth to people about what power is doing to them, then more people will stand up, and there will come a point when we all stand up against oppression, against injustice, and against corruption in politics. You see the power of solidarity. You see the power of solidarity, the power of all of us together. Individually, we may feel helpless, lonely, often frightened. Together, nothing can stop us. No tyrant can rule us. No party, government, or dictator can demand from us subservience. Together, we are powerful. Remember that and take that message onto the streets of Birmingham and share it with every single person you know in this country and abroad.
As James Price responded, once again, I am incredibly grateful to the Islamist MP Iqbal Muhammad for being honest to say that he wants to take over the whole of the UK. It's very good that he is telling us exactly what he wants to happen. We are now all better informed about how we should respond to this. And respond we must. Indeed, we need to do more than that. We need to fight for our Christian values, or more people will die. Which tragically is exactly what happened with Sara Sharif.
A review into the murder of 10-year-old Sara Sharif by her father and stepmother in Woking in 2023 has found that council staff tried to check on Sara's welfare the day before she died, but they went to the wrong address. She had been beaten, hooded and burned in the weeks before her death. But a review of Surrey Council's involvement with Sara found that the last opportunity to save her was missed because the council used her old address.
The findings of a damning new independent report into the death of 10-year-old Sara Sharif. The review, which has been released in just the last few moments, finds that from social services to the NHS and educational authorities, the system failed Sara. It said she should never have been placed in the care of her father and stepmother, describing the killers as a lethal combination. Sara was murdered by her father, Irfan Sharif, and stepmother, Bainish Batul, in August 2023.
Okay, but again, those corrupted MSM sources have actually missed the real story, outlined here by Bernie Spofforth. A beautiful little girl tortured to death by her father. It's reported authorities missed her injuries because they didn't want to be called racist for asking her to remove her hijab. Another reason to ban it. How many other girls and women are hiding abuse in this way? As the Daily Mail headlined the story, too woke to save Sara Sharif. And they report that Sara was tortured to death by her father after a catalogue of blunders by authorities who missed bruises under her hijab as they feared causing offence. The 10-year-old was beaten to death by Irfan Sharif after the risk posed by the serial domestic abuser was overlooked, not acted on, and underestimated by almost all professionals, despite his 16-year history of attacking women and children, according to a damning safeguarding review. In acts of brutality described by a judge as the worst crime he had ever encountered, Sara suffered over 100 injuries when she was tied up and hooded in a plastic bag secured with parcel tape around her head before being battered with a cricket bat, metal pole and a rolling pin, strangled until her neck broke, burnt with an iron and bitten. Now a safeguarding review has identified a catalogue of missed opportunities to rescue Sara, concluding different actions could and should have been taken, and the system failed to keep her safe. Mistakes included failing to probe why the Muslim schoolgirl was suddenly wearing a hijab, as professionals feared causing offence. The blistering report identifies how professionals failed to join the dots, as evidence of Sharif's extensive domestic abuse was lost within the system. Inexperienced social workers under pressure to be speedy did not carry out basic checks, safeguarding processes were not followed, and home visits were delayed with fatal consequences. Now, at least GB News and Talk TV did cover the real story today of this outrageous tragedy.
Marilyn, what are those safeguarding officials afraid of when they fail to take action?
Oh, I'll tell you what it'll be. You know as well as I do, Miriam. It's the R word.
They're fear that they'll be called racist.
Racism, that's what it'll be. It'll be racism.
So you're saying if this was a white British family, they would have not hesitated to intervene?
They were still at the same problem because the system is broken. Make no mistake, the system is broken. I get cases, awful cases, every single day where mothers are not being heard. The police don't turn up. I mean, this should have been a police case before it was a death. You know, the trouble is social services seem to be like the police now. The police seem to hand it over to social services. And if social services say it's a crime, then the police step in again. But all of this is a lottery, depending where you live, depending who you get. And the trouble, since lockdown, they are all working remotely.
The neighbours of Sara Sharif did not report concerns about her, that she was being abused, because they were scared of being called racist. I mean, how many times have we heard that? You think the head teacher in Cabana in the review of what happened, failing to prevent him being able to murder and attempt to murder all those girls last year. The head teacher basically said he was, he was described him as threatening and like, no, she mustn't and mustn't describe him because it was playing into racist, memes. The Manchester Arena security guard who stopped that, who saw the bomber, saw Abedi with the rucksack and thought, well, what are you doing here with your big rucksack at a concert with loads of little girls from Ariana Grande, and didn't say anything because he didn't want to be accused of being racist or Islamophobic. So once again, same issues where this wasn't stopped, it wasn't prevented because of PC concerns.
But the suicidal empathy of those in charge of our country means there is now a renewed focus on doing things to purposefully damage us, to purposefully destroy us, like returning Shamima Begum, Britain's most famous ISIS bride, and a traitor who is no longer one of us, either legally or morally, back to our country. Now, the mere concept of that has caused widespread revulsion for years for very obvious reasons.
What was it about Islamic State that attracted you? What did you like about it?
The way they showed how you can go, they'll take care of you, you can have your own family there, you can do anything. You're living under Islamic law.
Did you know what Islamic State were doing when you left for Syria? Because they had beheaded people, there were executions.
Yeah, I knew about those things and I was okay with it at first because You know, I started becoming religious just before I left. And, you know, from what I heard, that Islamically that is all allowed, so I was okay with it.
You didn't question that?
No.
No, she went with what is being taught in mosques throughout East London even now. But she cannot come back. Is it a surprise, though, given Slippery Starmer's personal view?
I think the decision by the Home Secretary was the wrong decision, and I think it was a rushed decision. And I think it left out of account the interests of the newly born child who's tragically died. Had the interest of the child been taken properly into account, I think we would see that this was a wrong decision and a rushed decision by the Home Secretary. Well, he's got Ken did a lot of cases, as I did, under the Terrorism Act. He knows exactly what can be done back here. I think what he says is right. I think actually the Home Secretary needs to come to Parliament tomorrow, make a statement on this and face questions. I think that's the right thing to do in the circumstances as they now are, because I think there is a growing feeling that this decision wasn't properly made.
So again, I'm not at all surprised that in the past few hours, we have a disgraceful deep state recommendation that I want to take you through. Shamima Begum, the Islamic State bride, should be allowed back into Britain, a review of counter-terrorism policy has found. Begum, 26, was stripped of her British citizenship after fleeing London at the age of 15 to join ISIS. She is currently living in a detention camp in Syria. However, the Independent Commission on UK Counter-Terrorism concluded after a 3-year review that she and other British people held in Syrian camps should be repatriated. They said the camps risked being seen as Britain's Guantanamo, a reference to the US detention facility at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, which was used indefinitely to hold al-Qaeda suspects in the years after the September 11th attacks on the US. The commission, which included, and listen to this deep state list, Dominic Grieve, the hopeless former Attorney General, Saeed Avazi, the hopeless former Tory chair, and Sir Peter Fahey, the former Manchester police chief, warned that the UK's current policy of resisting repatriation was unsustainable and inconsistent with the UK's international human rights obligations. Conditions in the camps constitute inhuman and degrading treatment. The experiences of women and children under ISIS were complex and varied, with many being victims of coercion, trafficking and sexual exploitation, while others may have actively supported the organisation, said the Commission. International evidence shows that repatriation is practically possible with largely positive outcomes and manageable security concerns. Countries implementing systematic repatriation demonstrate that return prosecution, where appropriate, and rehabilitation programs can effectively manage risks while upholding human rights. The UK's reluctance to repatriate has made it an outlier among comparable jurisdictions and may ultimately prove counterproductive to long-term security interests. Now, all of this Islamist threat, Shamima Begum, Sara Sharif, hijabs, hiding, the most revolting form of abuse, is why, and let me repeat this, Shabana Mahmood's admittance that she puts Islam above anything else in her day-to-day life should rule her out of succeeding Slippery Starmer as Prime Minister. Again, just watch her words, please.
Islam, my own religion, like a lot of practicing Muslims, my faith is the most important thing in my life. It is the absolute driver of everything that I do. I feel a very strong calling of my own conscience, and my conscience calls me to God.
Now, the superstar panel. Sarah White and Nick Buckley, both with me. Nick Buckley, Shabana Mahmood says Islam is the absolute driver of everything she does. Everything she does. And she's now the favourite to replace Keir Starmer, even though the mainstream media are trying to protect her and are using Wes Streeting as the stalking horse. Do you feel comfortable in a Christian country to have someone who puts Islam ahead of everything else as Prime Minister?
We've already had a Hindu as Prime Minister, and it wasn't that long ago that you couldn't be a Prime Minister if you was a Catholic. Now, that wasn't that long ago. What we need the press to do is we need the press to ask her certain questions. Do you remember the grilling that the leader of the Lib Dems got? Is it Tim something? I forget his name now. He was a devout Christian, and the press hounded him to say that being gay was a sin, and they hounded and hounded. I want the same sort of questions now directed at her. What does she mean by I'm a Muslim, I follow, this or that? That can mean anything to anybody. She needs to be asked some serious questions. Is homosexuality a sin? Is it okay to own a slave? Is it okay to rape? Is it okay to have sex with a 9-year-old and marry a 6-year-old? These are the questions we need brave reporters to ask her, so we know exactly what strain, what type of Muslim she is. But to answer your question clearly, I don't mind if someone is a prime minister and has a different religion, is not Christian, but they need to understand and need to admit this is a Christian country. But I want to know what she means by I'm a Muslim.
Yeah, and the fact that it's the driver of everything she does, Sarah White. Now, I don't feel comfortable about that in a Christian country. And I feel we're very weak to speak out against this here in the United Kingdom, whereas in the US, for example, with the election of Mamdani as the New York mayor, people were actually quite prepared to say, actually, it's just not compatible. It's just not compatible in a Christian country to have an Islam leader.
Yeah, I don't feel comfortable with it either. And for somebody to say that they put their religion as the driver of everything that they do, well, how does she interpret the Muslim faith? Because we all know that many Muslims interpret it in many different ways. And like Nick just said, is she comfortable with a grown man marrying a child? That's not a Christian belief. And I do think that it should be people who are born and bred in this country that have Christian morals and beliefs should be in places of power. If you are going to, I'm not saying that non-Muslims can't go into power. However, if that is your main driver, then I'm not comfortable with what decisions you're going to make for our country.
And that's what she's just admitted. That is the problem. And I do really fear that the mainstream media is just ignoring every single threat of Islam. And this Sara Sharif report today, Nick Buckley, the line that was clearly the most important, and congratulations, by the way, to the Daily Mail and Talk TV and GB News, which were prepared to report on this. But did you notice, Nick, it was completely ignored by the British Bashing Corporation and Sly News in their reportage. The most important thing is that the reason the officials were not prepared to follow up was because they were scared that if they asked what was really under her hijab, why she was really wearing a hijab, they would be accused of racism. And that is this toxic woke mind virus, which is literally killing people. It killed people at the Manchester Arena when the security guard was too scared to approach the suicide bomber. And this young girl is dead as a result.
This is a great example of our 2-tier system, 3, 4, 5-tier system, depending who you are. This girl was let down because of that system. She was let down because the professionals who we're paying through our taxes to protect her and save her, they put their jobs and their careers ahead of her safety. Now, the only way we get around this is not necessarily with more laws, more legislation, training courses. It's to hold those people accountable. It's to sack some of them who failed. We never sack anyone in the public sector. And if you're
they're
working
never named, they're always protected.
Yes, yeah, exactly. I mean, they need some people need sacking over this. And we need to get to a stage where we have a professional social worker going, right, there's a girl in front of me who has got a hijab on or has a different costume and I'm not sure what's going on. I don't want to be rude. I don't want to be called racist. But I know that if I make a mistake here, I lose my job and I might even end up in jail. Do you know what? Call me racist, because my job and my pension is more important to me. Therefore, I will be called racist. I don't mind that now. But at the moment, they play the safe hand, which is, I'll do nothing, no complaints, no accusations of racism. We have exactly the same thing with knife crime in this country. We have young black men dying in pools of their own blood. And the reason why we allow it to happen is because to stop it, professionals will be called racist for targeting young black men who are stabbing young black men. So these professionals would rather have young black men die in pools of their own blood than rather be called hurty names. It's all the same problem. It's a two-tier system.
It is. It absolutely is. And I mean, Sarah White, obviously the whole reason that you have found public prominence is because of your campaign specifically for the safety of young women. And in this case, you know, it was, in your case, sorry, it was young white women who were being attacked outside the Bell Hotel in Epping, Essex. But I mean, here is a young Muslim girl who was completely let down by the state. And it's just as bad.
Oh God. And this is the thing. We know that there was in the predominantly Pakistani men who were sexually assaulting and raping young white girls. But that's because that's coming to light, because these women are being so brave and coming forward and speaking out about it. However, in the Pakistani community, I wonder what is going on in there, because they are told they can't speak out. It's something to be shameful for. So we also are protecting, or we want to protect these women and children as well, because we know that it does go on in their community, but it is all brushed under the carpet, hush, hush, no one's allowed to say anything. Coming from a culture that they think it's acceptable to marry someone as young as 6 and sleep with someone just because she started her periods, that is totally unacceptable. And that is a mind that is undeveloped at the end of the day. They've come from a culture that is not evolved or developed.
Exactly. And it's just not acceptable for us in the West, and it shouldn't be. But this is why they want Sharia courts, and why you see people like Adil Ray trying to soften us. You know, oh, Sharia courts, they're really compassionate. I mean, what planet are you on, mate? And then we've got the Shamima Begum campaign, and they're never going to rest. They're never going to rest the members of the deep state. Where do you both stand on Begum? Do either of you want her back?
Definitely not.
Absolutely not. Not because if she comes back here, she'll be a threat, because the odds are she probably won't be a threat. But we need to start thinking of the future. What's the message are we sending to tomorrow's jihadis who we're saying to young people in this country? It's okay to be a traitor. It's okay to go to another country and hate us and fight us and kill us, because we'll forgive you at the end of the day and you can always come back. No.
And this is nobody, there's no punishment. There's no punishment at all. You made that decision, and I don't care how old you was, you made the decision, you went off and witnessed some of the worst atrocities that anyone could possibly witness, and you didn't seem to be fazed about it. So no, we don't want you here. And our country, our government just bends over backwards for these people continuously, and it's got to stop. And people do need to be held accountable. I'm definitely not. I would never want that woman back in this country ever again.
Breaking right now, the Mike Graham fallout grows for Talk TV as another star presenter on the station speaks out, ignoring boss's plea for silence after Mike was brutally sacked yesterday. Now, there is a bit of a fight back going on from News UK sources who have leaked to the Daily Express the real reason Mike was axed from Talk TV. And I'm going to take you through that reporting and reveal the facts as I know them in just one moment, plus show you everything in this impassioned speech from Russell Quirk, a star of Mike Graham's Plank of the Week, a regular host on the station, who says the way that this has been mishandled by bosses mean that it's probably not going to survive. But in case you missed it yesterday, here is how Julia Hartley-Brewer broke the news to furious listeners who, are now engaging in a massive boycott of Talk TV.
News UK, the parent company of the station Talk, has made the following statement. Their statement reads as follows: "We were made aware of an abhorrent and vile post on Mike Graham's social platform several weeks ago. Mike Graham said this was not posted by him, and he agreed to cooperate with a company investigation using an independent forensic firm. He later reneged on several opportunities to cooperate with the company investigation. We have been gravely concerned at his repeated failure to cooperate on such a serious matter, and the decision has been taken that Mike Graham will not return to Talk."
And now, with Mark Dolan replacing Mike Graham in the lineup, a TV insider is fighting back, revealing the real reason why Mike Graham was fired from Talk TV after nearly 20 years to the Daily Express newspaper. This is what you call a desperate bid at damage control. So they report a source from News UK, the parent company of Talk TV, has given an insight into the real reason behind Graham's removal. They exclusively told The Express Mike Graham had to go. He claimed that his phone had been hacked, but everyone was skeptical of that explanation. He claimed that someone had hacked his Facebook account, but also hacked his iCloud and posted the offensive statement. News UK bosses gave him the benefit of the doubt and told him they would allow Mike and his legal representation to stand in a room with two forensic phone experts who would be able to go through his phone and figure out if he was actually hacked, who hacked the phone, and what else they accessed. While Mike initially agreed to submitting his phone, he didn't turn up on the agreed date and time. So News UK gave him another date. And again, Mike did not turn up. This happened 4 times. 4 times he refused to hand over his phone. So News UK took the decision to end their working relationship with him. Mike was told he was sacked by the big boss, and they explained the reason behind the decision. Now, at the end of the day, that's certainly not what I'm hearing from Mike, who engaged one of Britain's top legal teams to protect him. Because, of course, how on earth can you trust a company, especially a company known for the biggest phone hacking operation in British history, to actually treat this information contained on the phone, which Mike is very clear includes journalistic communications that needed to remain private? How on earth could he trust that that would remain secure? Now, there's been a huge reaction, of course, to the news, with even celebrities like Christine Hamilton weighing in, saying, Talk TV must have a death wish, Mike. They are mad to let you go, just like GB News are mad to let Hamilton go. Thank you, Christine. He's thriving elsewhere, and so will you. And now, a first chink in the armour in terms of the silence at Talk TV. All presenters have been told they must say nothing about this, which is, of course, hugely ironic for the channel which used to be known as the home of free speech. But I have huge respect for Russell Quirk, a regular presenter on the station. He was a guest on the very first Plank of the Week. He is due back on Plank of the Week next week. And he's just said, I have to say something. I have to say something. And it is a powerful message. Watch this.
Okay, so I am probably going to get into trouble for this, but someone needs to talk about Mike Graham. Look, I have a connection to Talk TV on the basis that for the last 5 or 6 years, I have been a contributor, I've been a guest on Talk TV, various shows, and over the last 2 or 3 years, I've been lucky enough and very grateful to have been trusted with a few shows. I've done about 50 shows on my own, covering for the likes of Ian Collins, Julia Hartley-Brewer, Kevin O'Sullivan, and Alex Phillips, and so on. So I'm very lucky, very grateful, yes, that is, I guess, what qualifies me to make this video, albeit, I'll be clear, I am not an insider, and I am not party to probably any more information than anybody else is. And in fact, recently, I've been at Talk a lot less, not anything to do with Talk, not any management decision, no cancellation, nothing of that ilk, but simply because I chose to go and get elected as a Reform councillor on October the 2nd. And in the run-up to that, in what's called the Purdah period, I had to stand down to the Ofcom rules, the Ofcommunists, as Dan Wootton calls them, dictate that you cannot be, you can be on air, but the restrictions, the rules and the regulations are very, very tight indeed. So Talk took the view, understandably, rightfully I think, to bench me for the few weeks in the run-up to my election campaign.
But he is back on air now and appreciates that speaking out could see him blacklisted from the station, but he says morally it's something he just has to do. Watch.
However, we need to come to the subject of Mike Graham, because over the last 4 weeks, there has been, I think it's fair to say, no pun intended, radio silence by Talk until yesterday, when it was announced on Julia Hartley-Brewer's show that Mike effectively is not coming back to Talk as a consequence of this debacle over this post that appeared on his social media, which he says was placed by somebody else by way of a hack. But that effectively said the following, that he had an issue with the fact that multiculturalism had not worked, was surrounded by a sea of non-white faces in London, and so on and so on. Now, I'd like, first of all, to deal with what I think about that post, and regardless of whether it came from Mike or indeed was hacked. Bearing in mind, Mike did have his phone stolen about 2 weeks before that incident. So, you know, there is certainly some credibility to the belief that, as Mike has clearly said and maintained, that his phone was hacked.
And of course that is true, but at the same time, we had Father Calvin Robinson here on the show yesterday, a long-time supporter of Talk TV, who said, no, there was nothing abhorrent about the post, and there's no way that Mike Graham should have been sacked, even if he did send it. Russell Quirk had more to say on this.
I guess I'll get into trouble because I don't believe that what Mike has done is incorrect in any way, particularly when you are the presenter, as Mike was, of the most successful show on that channel, The Breakfast Show from 6 till 10, and which as a show and a channel overall is famous for trumpeting the fact that it is the home of free speech and common sense. Now, on that basis, and I'm a bit of a free speech absolutist, I think that you should be able to say whatever you like. You can have whatever opinion you like. But that is obviously what has been advanced by Talk. And one of the reasons that I and many of you love Talk is because it champions free speech and opinion. And bearing in mind, Talk is not a news channel as such. It is an opinion channel. And Mike, I think, has been, along with others, Julia, Jeremy and Kevin and so on, have been the champions of that over many, many years, and that's why we love them. So I do think there's an irony to someone having a post appear on their social media channels that talks about an opinion which also relates to something that is concerning millions of people in this country in terms of illegal immigration, for instance, as part of that debate. But that in that person's own time, they say something that later on then effectively gets them the boot from their job. Mike wasn't at work. He was not on air. This was his private thoughts.
Of course. And I also think there is an irony, and I know this to be true, that there has been nothing publicly said by Julia or Jeremy or Kevin or Mark. That doesn't sit well or comfortably, because it's like Mike Graham was this station. You cut him open, he would bleed Talk, and now he's just been erased from history. And Russell Quirk, in the statement, which I think is probably most likely to now also see him sacked by Talk, says that he believes the very survival of the station is at risk as a result of their handling of this incident. In fact, he believes it probably will not go on.
Commercial implications of firing the most successful and most popular person on Talk TV. A man that would get tens of thousands of people watching his show on YouTube, listening on DAB, and indeed watching back and looking at social media clips and so on and so on. So in this kind of pang of, some might say, kind of woke morality on the part of News UK to get rid of someone that dares to say something that some people might think is a bit offensive and a bit odd and a bit wrong, they're now in a position where, if you look at the breakfast show since Mike was benched, the ratings have halved. If you look at Plank of the Week, a show that I am honoured to be part of, I actually was on the first ever Plank of the Week show about 6 years ago, and I continue to be on that show or was perhaps until this video, and have been for the last 5 or 6 years. In fact, I'm booked to do next week. Let's see what happens. Yeah, it just seems that the bosses at News UK, and I mean News UK, and I don't know them. I don't know Rebecca Brooks and Scott and others. I don't know, never met them. I do know the bosses on the 17th floor, Denny Morris, who I think he's a thoroughly decent guy, by the way, and I think will probably be really upset about what's going on here. However, I think the bosses have made a catastrophic mistake commercially, but also in terms of standing up for the right to free speech. So on the basis that the Plank of the Week show that I was just referencing has now seen its audience halve from 300,000 a week to about 150,000 because of Mike Graham's absence. And his show, The Breakfast Show, which it looks like now might be taken over by Jeremy, I don't know, I don't think he knows yet, actually. The commercial implications of what has happened here, I'm afraid, I think now put a big question mark, not over just the commercial viability of talk itself, but also its very future.
Whoa. So Russell Quirk, an existing presenting on Talk, says this is catastrophic. The station may not survive. It's very awkward. I'm sure it's awkward for my superstar panel too, Nick Buckley and Sarah White, who I saw just this week on Talk. And of course, Talk in some ways is such a force for good. But Nick, do you understand why Russell Quirk has felt he had to speak out here? I have to be honest with you. I have huge respect for him doing so, Nick, because one of the hardest, most awful things when you are cancelled, and of course you know what it's like to be cancelled, I know what it's like to be cancelled, is the fact that people who were your colleagues, your friends for such a long period of time just go silent and sort of erase you. And I think we've got to start being braver. And I think what we just saw from Russell Quirk was reasonable, but also actually surprisingly brave. You know, to speak up against your employers like that is a big deal. And he knows the consequence might be that he then gets banned from Talk.
Absolutely. And that's what we're missing in the country. It's a level of bravery. No one's brave anymore now. And I get it to a certain extent if you've got a mortgage to pay. And the people who don't, I mean, when you were sacked from GB News, no one spoke up. And the people, well, Calvin spoke up and it cost him his slot on GB News. You know, we have to be braver because we're in a war at the moment trying to save this country. And if you're in a war, you need to be prepared to take some hits. But people don't want to take that hit. And if you work for an employer, then of course you're at their beck and call. You've got to do what they say. And places like GB News and Talk TV have shown us over the last couple of years that they are better than the mainstream media, but they're nowhere near what we need as mainstream media, as the alternative
Correct,
media.
because, for example, both of you are now involved in Advance UK, Ben Habib's party, and he is on a blacklist now on both channels, actually, despite having previously been one of its most popular guests. But Sarah White, you're not. You know, you still remain a popular person on both channels. So how do you feel about this sacking of Mike Graham and the silence that has surrounded it?
I mean, it's not right, is it? And, you know, hats off to anyone who has the courage to speak out as well. But yeah, it's not right because why would he have give his phone over? We see what happened with the police arresting Tommy Robinson. You know, you can't give your phone over when you've got information on there that could basically incriminate somebody else or leak your you know, where you get your information from, and you're protecting certain people as well because they might not want to be in the public eye. And you can't trust these people that look into your documents either, because we know that you know, stuff goes missing all the time and evidence has gone missing. And so, yeah, I don't think that they've done themselves any favours getting rid of Mike Graham, because at the end of the day, their viewings have halved. And did he really do anything wrong? He hasn't been found guilty of doing anything wrong. It's just hearsay at the end of the day. And like he said, his phone was stolen 2 weeks prior.
Yes,
Isn't it? You're not guilty until proven guilty.
Of course, and you know, News UK decided that the post was vile and abhorrent, but actually are we allowed to have a conversation about the fact that this mass immigration means that if you are a white person, you are becoming a minority? I mean, literally, Nick, literally, if you are in London as a white person, you are a minority. Is that not a conversation we're allowed to have?
It should be, but don't forget, we're still not allowed to have that in certain circles. And obviously, Talk TV is now one of those circles we're not allowed to have this conversation. Just because you work for an employer, all you're doing is selling so many hours a day to that person. And while you're working for them, of course, you've got to do as you're told because you've just sold yourself for so many hours every day. When you're not in work, then what does that have to do with your employer?
Breaking right now, extraordinary developments in the British bashing corporation's almighty fraudulent row with the US President Donald Trump. Because in the past hour, since we've come on air, the Daily Telegraph, which of course was the first to blow the whistle on this doctored panorama speech, which has seen Trump now sue the BBC for £1 billion, or at least threaten to, $1 billion, or at least threaten to, unless the BBC apologises and sufficiently provides damages, I'm told something like $15 million by 10 p.m. UK time on Friday. They're going to be in deep, deep doo-doo. The Guardian reporting today that the BBC is indeed ready to apologise to Donald Trump, who has gone out via his White House chief spokesperson, Caroline Leavitt, describing the organisation as, what were the exact words? A leftist propaganda machine. Yep, couldn't have put it better myself. But as I say, things have just got a hell of a lot worse because Panorama was not a one-off. The Daily Telegraph's Daily Tea podcast has this hour revealed that Newsnight, the hard left broadcast Newsnight, also doctored a Trump speech, and concerns were ignored by the corporation. So this is an extraordinary new development. I'm going to be learning about this at exactly the same time as you. Likewise, my superstar panel, Sarah White and Nick Buckley. So let's look at this brand new reporting on this deepening scandal, and we'll give you our first reaction. Watch this.
Of Newsnight, in which they were discussing the congressional hearings into Donald Trump's role in the January 6th riots.
We're going to walk down anyone you want, but I think right here we're going to walk down to the Capitol and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women, and we fight. We fight like hell, and if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. We're going to walk down anyone you want, but I think right here we're going to walk down to the Capitol and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women, and we're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them.
And the footage then cuts immediately to scenes of people fighting.
And it cuts seamlessly, so it does make it seem as if Fight Like Hell came immediately after the initial statement, when in fact it came 54 minutes later in that particular speech. Kirsty Walk then brings in two contributors to react to the footage and to speak about the whole story. One of them is Kadia Gober. She's a politics reporter for BuzzFeed. She was on the ground at the time of the Capitol riots that day. And then they also speak to Mick Mulvaney, who was Donald Trump's chief of staff from 2019 to 2020.
Your video, and I'm no apologist for the president.
No, I'm not suggesting you are. I'm not suggesting you are. But what I'm saying is that
your video actually spliced together the presentation. He said we're going to go down and we're going to cheer on our senators and our House members, and then it actually goes on to say in some of them we might not be able to. And that line about it, we fight and fight like hell, is actually later in the speech, and yet your video makes it look like those two things came together. That's the type of messaging here that so many people in my country find frustrating, is that it's hard to actually get the facts.
Now, crucially, what also makes this worse, Tim, is that we have spoken to a whistleblower who worked on Newsnight at the time that recalled this. We spoke to David Chaudroy during the week to find out what happened the following day when he attended, along with others, an editorial meeting.
Then in the editorial the next day, one producer said, how did that go out? Why did that happen? And the editorial editor, not the VT editor, kind of brushed it off. And I thought that was extraordinary that something like that had gone out, but it was the BBC, and when you're in that milieu, you kind of don't question things. I'm just there for the graphics. That's what I do. They don't really listen to you.
This is extraordinary. Absolutely extraordinary. Because, of course, up until this point, Sarah White, the BBC have been able to hide behind this idea, well, the Panorama documentary was made by an external production company, October Films. They're all at it. They're all at it. And it was called out on air. And they did nothing about it. I mean, this is, I think, just another hammer blow, is it not, to the reputation of this deeply corrupted organisation.
Oh, 100%. I mean, we know how corrupt the BBC are, and it's been apparent for years, and yet they hide behind their own media and they put out all this propaganda. But again, nobody is held accountable, and they need to be held accountable because everybody in there knows the correct news, but they're complicit in it. They know what's being doctored, and why isn't anybody held accountable? I'd like the BBC to be defunded. They are outdated. They are old news now, and they aren't current. They don't let anybody see the truth. We know that there's certain news channels that do feed out the truth, like GB News. We're not so sure about Talk TV now, but BBC need to be held accountable, and the news reporters need to be held accountable as well. I mean, they incited violence. That it did. It incited violence by doctoring that speech.
Nick Buckley, Nigel Huddleston, who is the Shadow Culture Secretary, has looked at this new evidence and says this is yet another example of where the BBC has failed. The sheer volume of incidents points to a deep-rooted problem of bias within BBC News and Current Affairs. There must be full accountability and appropriate consequences for what has occurred, and resignations are not enough. There must be a full investigation. If Britain's national broadcaster cannot uphold its charter responsibilities and adhere to its own editorial standards, it risks losing the public trust on which its very existence depends. Well, I would argue he's not going far enough. It's gone. The public trust in this organisation has gone. When is our elite class going to wake up?
First of all, we need to understand that the BBC has always been a propaganda arm of the British state. It was set up to do that. 50 years ago, we thought they were better than they were because we had nothing to compare it to. Totally. So therefore, we thought we were always getting the truth and a bias, and production values were good. So it looked like this is the truth. But we compare it to other news agencies, your show, other people, and now we see the lies. The only way the BBC is going to get better is if we commercialise it. That's why the licence fee needs to go. I don't necessarily want the BBC to disappear. I want because some people enjoy the BBC. Fantastic, let's have a choice. But the people who enjoy it should pay for it. And then those editors and the programme makers have an incentive then to provide things the public wants. Because at the moment, it's just propaganda arm. It's managers making decisions themselves about, well, I believe this, and I'm a BBC man or woman. And if only we could get the general public thinking more like me, we'd have a much better country, So let's increase the propaganda, let's twist the narrative, and let's keep sending them these messages. And eventually, the whole country will be able to be employed by the BBC because they'll all be as good as me.
What I think really upsets me, though, is that yet again, because we have such a controlled and cucked deep state and elite class, it's actually being left to the Americans to call this out for what it is. That embarrasses me. Like, we've got to stop being afraid to actually call out what the British Bashing Corporation is doing. It shouldn't be a sacred cow, okay? This is an organisation, can I just remind everyone, that shielded the worst paedophile in British history in Jimmy Savile for decades, which allowed a celebrity paedophile ring to run for decades, which led directly through its shoddy journalism and Martin Bashir to the death of Princess Diana. Like, this is actually not an organisation that we as Brits have to feel that we should be proud of because they make a few good TV shows. It's just mad to me. And finally, I was delighted to see my friend Bev Turner, who works for GB News, but she's now based in Washington, D.C., being given the opportunity to ask Trump's spokesperson, Caroline Leavitt, about this. And Caroline Leavitt actually talking in language which I feel like I wish I saw from our politicians in this country when they're talking about the BBC. Watch this.
So the clock is ticking on the Friday deadline by which the BBC must retract and apologise for their malicious edit of the President in a documentary shown last year. The recently resigned Director General of the BBC yesterday described the organisation as the very best of society and blamed the enemies of the BBC for this outcome. Also yesterday, a senior government minister launched a fierce defence of the channel in the House of Commons, saying that the broadcaster remains a light on the hill for people all over the world. So, does the President feel that the network is taking the situation seriously? Does he believe that they've shown sufficient regret? Does this strain the relationship between the President and the Prime Minister? And given that the organisation is publicly funded, is the President prepared to bankrupt the BBC in his pursuit of truth and justice?
Well, thank you, Bev. There's a lot of questions in one there. I will say I know the President has a very good relationship with Prime Minister Starmer. You have been there. You've seen them in their interactions. You've questioned both leaders in your time joining us when we've gone to the United Kingdom a few different times now. However, he has always been very frank when he disagrees with leaders, even whom he has a good relationship with. And the BBC, being a fair news organization, is definitely an outlet. I think these two leaders would disagree. The President has made it very clear that this is a leftist propaganda machine that is unfortunately subsidized by British taxpayers, and he thinks that's extremely unfortunate for the great people of the United Kingdom and Great Britain. And I think that the President was deeply concerned by the editing, the purposeful and dishonest editing of his speech that was so clearly fake news, and he rightfully dubbed that term many years ago, and this is a classic example of that.
Yeah, but what infuriates me is that this type of fake news from the BBC happens every single day to Brits, okay, to Brits, and we're just meant to put up with it and just accept it. And they did this actually with Rupert Lowe, the leader of Restore Britain, after he asked a question in PMQs about the death penalty. And he is rightly furious. Watch this.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm basically doing this broadcast from my cubbyhole of an office in Parliament, where we have a large amount of scaffolding. And so forgive the backdrop. But the point of my message is that I asked a perfectly reasonable question in Parliament earlier on, the Prime Minister's questions, which, as usual, Keir Starmer failed to answer. The BBC have managed to misquote me in an appalling way. They posted and then deleted an incorrectitude. One would think that after the debacle of the Panorama issue, where they effectively cut and spliced and completely misinformed the public as to what was said by one of our greatest allies, Donald Trump in the United States. One would think that some humility after their recent faux pas would be in order. But to now misquote me clearly, I think now demands a massive apology. It won't be the first one I've had from the BBC, but I'm expecting an apology, and I'd like it as soon as possible. I'm sure everybody agrees, and if the death penalty referendum that I requested was put to the people, I have no doubt that, rather like Brexit, they would vote in favour. But in a democratic society, you have to be swayed by the majority, not the minority, which is what's currently happening. Thank you very much.
Now, actually, and I thank Donald Trump for this, there has been a result in this case. the British Bashing Corporation has actually had to apologise and issue a public correction. So BBC Politics post 39 minutes ago. This post corrects an earlier post which incorrectly quoted Rupert Lowe. This correction supersedes a previous clarification. We apologise to Mr. Lowe for the error. And Rupert says, positive news, the BBC has finally made an apology for their disgracefully misleading coverage for my death penalty question yesterday. There is an important lesson here. Fight back against the woke establishment. Challenge over and over. Do not accept it. We can win. And Nick Buckley, certainly, I have fought the BBC time and again, including on dodgy reporting that they were intending to do about me. But I hope that this public apology marks the start of an era where the BBC thought they could say anything about people on the right being over. And I think it's Donald Trump who's ended it. I really do.
I'm not as optimistic as you. I think the BBC will carry on doing what the BBC do, mainly for this reason. And you can relate this to all our public institutions and organisations. Nothing works in this country anymore, from the prison service to the police, to education, to the BBC. And the main reason why nothing, I mean, some of it is by design, but some of it is pure incompetence. And why? It's because we don't recruit on merit anymore now. We recruit on box ticking. You're the type of, you've got the same views that we want in the BBC, so we'll recruit you. You can't do the job. You're incompetent, you're stupid, but we'll give you the job because you've got the right views. You take a box in the prison service because you're black, you're gay, you're this, you're that. Same with the police force. You're a woman, you're 4'2", but we'll employ you to tackle 6-foot men. Nothing works. And the BBC is one of the reasons why it's not working, because it's full of incompetence.
Totally. And we've had so many lies, by the way, not just from the BBC, but from other leftist outfits. Like, look at this. Politics Joe has also had to issue a correction, Sarah, to Rupert Lowe, writing, earlier today we published a clip of Rupert Lowe falsely claiming he called to introduce the death penalty for asylum seekers. We would like to clarify he was calling for a referendum on the death penalty in cases of heinous crimes committed by foreign and domestic criminals. But as Rupert Lowe said, let's see if this gets as many views as the original post. And of course it won't.
No, it won't. And the thing is, it's that accountability again. And like Nick was just saying, DEI has gone mad. How is it that you can get your position because of a colour or your race or what your sexual orientation is? That's got nothing to do with how good you are at a job. And let's remember that the BBC, the judges, the police and Parliament are all in cahoots with one another, because at the end of the day, Keir Starmer also protected Jimmy Savile. So, you know, these people it's all of the left. The left are actually the racists, the fascists, the far right left thugs, because they all feel that they can say whatever they want about anyone from the right and get away with it. And no one is ever held accountable. And this is why we do need to start calling them out. So like how Donald Trump has done that, like how other people are, and then like me 100%. With the police. I'm 100%. Now suing the police because what they done to me.
Good on you.
We all need to do that. We need to speak out.
Good on you. Love to hear that, Sarah White. That was terrible what they did to you. And actually, what's so great about X is we're now allowed to have these conversations. I mean, on the death penalty, Rupert Lowe says, yes, if it were up to me, Axel Rudikamana would have received the death penalty. I don't see why evil should be kept living. I would vote yes in a referendum on the return of the death penalty, and I would hope he would be the first to receive it. Tristan Tate responding, I'd have taken it a step further, a referendum on public torture and execution for scum like him. It would be fitting. And because we have free speech on X, we are allowed to have these types of conversations. This is going to be a hard one in so many ways. But let me be very clear. John Cleese is a filthy scumbag. And I refuse anymore to ignore the revolting output of this deranged lunatic on the hard left because he was once a comedy icon. And I say this, by the way, as one of the biggest fans of Fawlty Towers. I say this as the guy that helped get Monty Python back together all of those years ago for that massive reunion tour when I was working at the Sun newspaper. And that was one of the great privileges of my career. And I say this as someone who was a colleague of John Cleese very briefly when he joined GB News and decided to sit down with me to reveal why. And I will come to that in just one moment. But this man is a filthy scumbag who has been completely captured now by the worst elements of the British hard left. Hacked off and byline times. And what he is proving, unfortunately, online is that this filthy scumbag will go so low in his attacks that he should no longer be considered a national treasure. And I've got the receipts, right? Even though he's deleted the post, over the weekend, he wrote, "Touching ceremony at the tomb of the unknown loser." That was, of course, in regards to Donald Trump's visit for Remembrance Weekend. And as Paz49 said, slagging off the unknown soldier is a new low for John Cleese. But there's so much more. So much more. Like he's described Elon Musk as being on the spectrum, prompting Zach Goldsmith to say, "So sad to see John Cleese regurgitating nonsense fake news so regularly. It's so easy to check this stuff before posting. What on earth has happened to him?" And what has happened, let me tell you, is he has been captured by these nutters on the hard left. Because that is exactly what the likes of Byline, Times, and Hacked Off are. And it just doesn't end. And this is the problem, that it doesn't end because the more he goes down this rabbit hole, the more nasty he gets. Britain is Broken posted, "Can I say as a Brit, we all reject John Cleese. He is a vile old man, concerned citizen. John Cleese is an awful human being." And how can you deny that? When he is reposting tweets like this about Erica Kirk, the wife of the late Charlie Kirk, saying happiest widow ever. You should be ashamed. John Cleese co-signing Erica Kirk allegedly applying fake tears theory sparked online outrage. Mr. Marleybone posted, "As a result, today I unfollowed one of my childhood heroes, John Cleese, who made me laugh and brought humour into my life. He has become a pathetic anti-Semite who is peddling lies about Jews and Israel on Twitter. How sad does he not have anything left in his life?" And there was another retweet, by the way, in regards to Erica Kirk. Alex Gandler said, "Not sure what's happened to John Cleese, but best to stay away from whatever's in his drinking water. I'll remember him for the brilliant wit and timeless comedy and try to forget the conspiracy theory nonsense he's descending into." Nuff said, wrote, "Imagine being John Cleese, reaching 86 years old. Behind you is a stunning comedy legacy, but now bored, sat in your red velvet slippers, finding the only affirmation in life is typing rage bait about Erica Kirk on your iPhone 7. And this decline and descent has been so recent, but I wanted to show you why there's this massive juxtaposition in terms of what John Cleese believes to be free speech. It's free speech for me, but not for thee. Because this is what he told me upon joining GB News when I was excited, because I presumed at that point, obviously I was very passionate about GB News, really believed that GB News was doing the right thing. And I believed that what this meant is that he truly believed in a lack of regulation and that he wanted there to be genuine free speech in the British media ecosystem. Watch.
John Cleese, welcome to GB News. It feels great saying that. I'm very excited.
Well, I'm excited because I'm doing this show with you. I've been working with a couple of guys on it, and the whole idea of being able to create a show from scratch without anyone looking over our shoulders. I mean, I wouldn't get an offer like this anywhere else on the planet. It's extraordinary. And I'm really looking forward to it because I think that there are so many cliches in ordinary television. It would be nice just to try and avoid those, just as a start. There's so much of this screaming at people. You see, I want to deal with a lot of the subjects that get people upset, but I want to get sensible people with a sense of humor who will listen to each other and who will trade arguments instead of simply making speeches.
Yeah. Indeed, and that's what we try and do on GB News. Always have both sides of the argument to have a respectful debate, but don't shut people down.
So I thought that's what he believed in, right? But then John Cleese launched his GB News show calling for more regulation of the media, for a beefed-up version of Ofcom.
As a knee-jerk reaction, support the Tories and a couple that supports the left. If we want more accurate and honest information, we have to regulate the newspapers that have basically become propaganda sheets. And the next step in doing that is to implement Leveson 2, so that when a newspaper prints something that's untrue, a regulatory body can order them to print a correction in the same size and the same prominence as the original untruth. We need a system more like Ofcom for the printed press. Now, the press will say this inhibits their freedom, and they're right, but only a little bit. It'll inhibit their freedom to tell any lies they like.
Bullshit, Cleese, because you're the liar, okay? You want free speech for me, but not for thee. And I'd had enough of this. So I decided I had to speak out. And John Cleese posted when Dan Wootton said free press. He meant a press that's free to do whatever it wants, untrammeled by rules or standards or any kind of moral restraint. When I was then effectively sacked from GB News in a free speech row, John Cleese bottled talking about it publicly. Right, and I was looking forward to the interview arranged with the lovely Zoe Ball tomorrow, but it has been cancelled from on high, as it would not be appropriate for me to talk about a GB News programme while the Wootton and Fox firings were in the news. And then, when his mates at Byline Times told a whole load of provable lies about me, John Cleese joined a pile-on urging the mainstream press to investigate allegations against his future GB News colleague, Dan Wootton. So yeah, I do have some personal skin in the game here, but as I say, to me, John Cleese was a hero, you know, an absolute comedy legend. And I think it was this moment when I realized, no, this guy is so far gone. Cleese posted on X 5 ways that Hitler was preferable to Trump. 1, he fought for his country. 2, he never used a teleprompter. 3, he was nice to dogs. 4, he wrote his own books. 5, he never played golf. 6, he wasn't a big fat slob. 5 ways Trump is preferable to Hitler. 1, he doesn't practice genocide. 2, he has nice hair. 3, 4, and 5 left blank. I repeat, John Cleese is a filthy scumbag. Joining me now, my superstar panel, Nick Buckley, MEE, and Sarah White. Nick, the whole thing is, right, John Cleese can say whatever he wants. I believe that. You know, I'm a free speech absolutist. I'm not suggesting he should be shut down in any way. But isn't there a huge irony here that he spreads conspiracy theories, that he spreads lies, he spreads disinformation? I can say that from my personal perspective, yet his biggest campaign is trying to shut down free speech on the right. But above all of that, Nick, isn't he also just proving himself to be deeply nasty and hugely unpleasant?
I'm actually surprised at some of the tweets you've just shown. I saw the one about the tomb of the unknown soldier, and I read that and thought, oh, that do you know what? He made a mistake there. He's trying to be funny. He's trying to be edgy. And I put that down to that. But seeing the ones about the widow of Charlie Kirk, they're horrendous. And retweeting that is, and he did it more than once. That's horrendous. I think it goes back to never, ever meet your heroes, because they never live up to what you've built them up in your mind. He's a comic genius. He has been for decades and decades. From all this stuff, I've loved all this stuff. But, I mean, we also need to, and I don't mean this in a negative way, I'm not trying to insult the man, but he's 86 now. So we need to think about, is he losing part of his mental capacity? Because some of this is absolutely horrendous. I don't know, but he's ruining his reputation.
Yeah, he really is, isn't he, Sarah White? I mean, what do you make of the downfall of John Cleese?
Well, I find it quite ironic that the jokes and the comedy that he used to be part of would be something that he would obviously stand against now. So is he doing what he's doing to be fashionable and trying to join the left and the woke mind media because he feels that they're the majority? And to say that Hitler, because he was nice to dogs, over somebody who didn't kill millions and millions of Jews because, you know, Hitler was nice to dogs. Trump hasn't killed any Jews. There's now Hitler's better than Trump. That's irrelevant. Like Hitler was one of the worst people to ever walk this planet. And John Cleese is obviously a supporter of Hitler. We know that he's anti-Semitic. So with all of his posts that he posts regularly, and I just think, yeah, maybe he needs his meds checked because at the end of the
Yes.
he's spreading misinformation, and the problem is people who follow him will start to believe what he's saying, and this is the problem again with like the BBC. People watch this and it's propaganda, and some people will believe him. The likes of us will be like, this man is totally deranged, we don't know what he's on, he's definitely woke, and he needs to be shut down.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because sometimes it's really amazing when your heroes get a platform, right? So I think of Ricky Gervais and all of the incredible stuff that he now posts on X and the fact that he feels untethered, or someone like J.K. Rowling, actually, who has obviously, or Graham Linehan, you know, so there are loads of examples, I guess. But I think that is, in a way, the great thing about social media. You can't hide who you really are. We've seen who John Cleese really is. Doesn't take away from the absolute brilliance of Fawlty Towers and Monty Python, and it never will. And obviously that will be a huge part of his epitaph. But in terms of what type of dude he's like, I'm going to repeat, filthy scumbag. But thank you so much to my fabulous superstar panel today. Anything other than filthy. Sarah White, who is, of course, one of the incredible Epping Pink Lady campaigners. And Sarah, you've got more coming, right?
Oh, we've got loads coming up. So on the 22nd of November, we're going to be at Chelmsford from 12 till 3. We're getting loads of pink ladies from all over the place, ferrying them all in to go and support the lovely women of Chelmsford. And that, so anybody who wants to come along and support, it's a movement led by women, supported by men. So we embrace everybody. And it's basically about standing up for what's right and having it that women and children and everybody feels safe in their local community, because that's a fundamental right of this country. We have evolved and developed over centuries to get the morals and the beliefs that we strive for in a Christian country. Whether you're a person of faith or just a good upstanding Christian person, that is what we need, and we need the root core to come back to being a fundamental Christian country.
Absolutely. Well, indeed, that fits very nicely with me just reminding you all about Nick Buckley's brilliant book as well. Anglophobia is the name, and it is available on Amazon, isn't it, Nick?
Yes.
It's such an important book.
It's all about looking at why the English hated, but more than that, why are we living in an age now where white people are hated? Why is anything white deemed negative? Part of it is jealousy and envy, but part of it, especially for English people and white people who tend to hate themselves and hate their culture and hate their country, investigate the mental health issues that are part of the problem and why they hate everything we've given the world.
It's an amazing book. It is available on Amazon. Thank you so much to my superstar panel today, Nick Buckley and Sarah White. We're going to reveal today's greatest British Union jackass literally in 30 seconds. But I've got to get to some of your feedback. Minty the Moose says, Islamists have more of a foothold on Britain and Europe. Some of us have been screaming about this for over 20 years or more on here, and good on you for doing so. Timo says, Starmer built his career on defending terrorist human rights. He literally wrote the book on it. Juliet Johnson says if Shamima Begum returns, Corbyn's party will probably help her run for a seat in Parliament. Nothing in today's Britain surprises me. And on the Mike Graham story, Jenny Chilton says Russell has, and speaking of Russell Kirk, has shown up the likes of Kevin O'Sullivan and Jeremy Kyle, who claim to be Mike's friends. Okay, a reminder of who's up for Union Jackass today. Tony Blair, nominated by Matt Cass 48, who says the death of the UK started with this man. Anas Sarwar, nominated by Darren Donaldson for his angry style, and Ed Davey, nominated by Jane Kendrick for calling for the sacking of Robbie Gibb at the British Bashing Corporation. And of course, he just blames it all on GB News, as he always does. Okay, here are the results. In third place with 24%, Anas Sarwar. The runner-up with 30%, Ed Davey. But today's Union Jackass with 46% of the vote, the former Prime Minister, Tony Blair. So, because it is a Thursday, we are putting our 4 Union Jackass winners from across the week head-to-head to find out the worst Briton in the world this week. You can vote right after the show on the posts section of my YouTube channel, Dan Wootton Outspoken, but I'm just going to remind you of who is going to be going head-to-head with Tony Blair to win this infamous gong. From Monday, it was Adil Ray for supporting Sharia law. From Tuesday, Tim Davey for his appalling behaviour at the British Bashing Corporation. And yesterday, the tit whisperer, Zach Polanski. So they'll all be going head-to-head in the post tab on YouTube. But our greatest Briton today is Alison Pearson, superstar columnist and one of the true patriots who remains in the British mainstream media, nominated by Lee Cohen, who says, like Dan, every day she exposes the truth and shapes Britain's most important public debate when the MSM won't. Okay, we're moving over to Substack now. Lady Colin Campbell is joining us from her hospital bed. My God, this woman is a trooper. But there's so much royal news to discuss. I do hope you'll join us over on Substack. www.outspoken.live is the address. We'll be back with you tomorrow, 5 p.m. UK time, midday Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Hit subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. Make sure that you subscribe to our podcast as well on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Please rate and review. And most importantly, I promise to keep fighting for you.